All right, play it forward with Leah Yananton, filmmaker, writer-director of Surviving Me.
Woo!
Why this story? And by the way, we got to mention that you were nominated by Samantha Shada. Thanks, Samantha.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. So why did I make Surviving Me? I made Surviving Me because of my experience in college. I went to college in New York City, and 9/11 happened my sophomore year. And I felt like the world collapsed around us. And at the same time, when you're a college student, you're in your late teens, young 20s. With science, we now know our brains are still developing. But that hookup culture, the dating scene, it's college is like a big party. And so I found that dating scene to be completely out of control, sort of destructive for both sides, this hookup culture of like no strings attached. And so I felt like it was consumerism at a personal level. And, while young men play the upper hand and maybe benefit from getting to play the field or, be the dominant side, it was like there was a lot of talk of women's, liberation and feminism to act like that, to act like that kind of man dating. And I didn't see either side, men or women, finding love or happiness or well-being from that.
It's interesting that you use the word consumerism, that it's part of a consumer culture in terms of sexual coming of age or habits or practices.
Absolutely. Yeah, it just felt like depersonalizing, dehumanizing. And I want to talk about the culture that was the background for me at that time, around 2001 in New York City. There was a radio program, Opie and Anthony, that did this. Wow. It was an acronym for Whip 'em Out Wednesday, which meant that women should flash their breasts. Like if any man yells, whip 'em out. And it was all pervasive, throughout this tri-state area up to Boston. This radio show was so popular. It was on Sirius Radio and a major radio channel on the car. And at times, like I even remember you'd see these bumper stickers everywhere. One time I was at a red light and the van next to me had these two guys and they were like holding up this Whip 'em Out Wednesday bumper sticker at me. And just in my research around the movie, looking that up, because you have these faint memories and I'm like, what? Wow. So also in this journey of making the film, I've also pieced together why I made it, because
Sure.
at the time I didn't have the language, which is why I had to make the film. I had to tell a story for my subconscious, because these feelings I had of anguish, mental anguish and emotional anguish, I didn't have the language for it. So anyway, there's a lot of stuff online, even of women getting driven off the road by, men who are harassing them in their trucks, demanding they whip them out. And at that time too, it was like CNN was obsessed with Paris Hilton. And Paris Hilton was lifting her skirt up on red carpets. A book came out called Female Chauvinist Pig. And that author talked about this, how women are objectifying themselves, thinking they're liberated, when it's still holding them in bondage, to be validated by the male gaze. And also at that time, okay, I don't need to finish that film.
No, I mean, you could, but, I get it, and that's like the crazy thing about, and I understand now why you're talking about consumerist culture. It's like consumerist commercial culture. I mean, it's the propaganda of like the quick, easy sensation that's going to, penetrate somebody's psyche. And that's like flashing a red light in front of them, it triggers that kind of primal impulse in sex, drugs, rock and roll. I mean, that immediacy gratification. And, science research, whatever you call it even common sense that's been proven by the scientific method, right? It says that children that are more able to delay the gratification, immediate gratification, become happier adults, right? So, you know, we're in a world that people are selling shit to us, and that shit, you know, they're getting paid to sell shit. So it's the cycle. Well, if we buy the shit, they're getting money to get paid, and they're, you know, getting more money to get paid, presumably if they can sell better shit. And so it's an easy way to reach. And coming of age as a young woman, 18, entering high school, especially if you've not, you know, I was lucky enough. I was that guy who like had the long-term relationships, and I had, you know, and when I was in college, I had a girlfriend the whole time. So, you know, I wasn't a part of that thing, and I never really got into it because you know, it didn't feel good. And so, and I didn't really subscribe to that message that this is what you do. But, you know, other people certainly don't have that same experience. And if that's the message that's being flashed at you, it's like, yeah, let's party, let's, you know, rock and roll, let's flash your titties.
Yeah, and I think I remember what I was going to say. Girls Gone Wild reached its height of, you know, fame and wealth and pervasiveness. So it became, you know, this Girls Gone Wild was the sort of home video where these film crews would be sent out to film girls on spring break, getting trashed. And flashing their tits, and the film crews were even participating in that sexual harassment and sexual assault at times too. You know, where girls were getting assaulted on camera, and it was being marketed as comedy and as entertainment. And so not only was it, you know, softcore porn, but it was assault. It was violent.
Right.
And young boys are watching that, you know, and now since then, I mean, you know, Facebook started when I was a junior in college, and it was just within a few colleges. And then, you know, after I graduated, it started to open up to others, and now it's open to the world. And, you know, and Twitter exists now. And like, I was shocked that there's just graphic porn on Twitter. I had no idea.
Oh, really? I had no idea either.
Yeah. Okay. I was like, what?
Wow,
you know, there's GIFs, GIFs, whatever, of porn acts and explicit stuff. And like, you know, so many children have tablets and iPads, and I don't see how they can be protected from exposure to this stuff. And
well, you know, I think it's all a maturation process, right? Whether, and that, you know, getting back to your film and why this film, you know, you were hurt, and you went on this journey of thinking that this was the path to go, and then this path didn't bring you pleasure, ultimate satisfaction, or lasting pleasure, and then you realize, man, this is not the way to go. Let me, you know, I think great art, no matter what, has to be cathartic. It's just got to be cathartic for the artist, or else it doesn't resonate, and there's no real, you know, weight or depth or substance or translucence or
transformation.
Yeah, or transcendence, you know, really beyond that particular product, right? There's something in an artistic product that is beyond itself, if it, you know, works on that higher level. So, you know, I can understand you having to make that and go through that journey and make this thing that is a purging and a catharsis and enlightenment and a maturation for yourself, and can be potentially for other women, and is an alternate media source. So I get that. And, you know, getting us to the second question is, what is the meaning of the movie? What is the message of the movie now as you look back on it?
Definitely the metaphor, the journey of Dante's Inferno added a lot of meaning. That story is at the heart of mine, which is sometimes when you're in shit, you got to go deeper into it before you can find that transcendence. And in the case of the movie Surviving Me, The 9 Circles of Sophie, which is the full title, Sophie, played by Christine Rindek, who just does an amazing job. Every time I watch the film, and I've seen it like a million times now, you know, through making it, I'm just so impressed with her performance and all of the actors. Mira Furlan, she plays Jacqueline Slateman, the professor's wife. Frederick Lane plays Professor Slateman. Vincent Piazza plays Jimmy, Sophie's boyfriend or hookup buddy. And I play Kira, her best friend. And so Sophie makes some decisions out of fear and security, and they're kind of the wrong decisions at time, a white lie here or there, and it pulls her deeper into her problems. So it gets darker for her, and she falls further into the inferno of that error of self. And so the movie has 9 chapters for each of the 9 circles of hell as she's experiencing them. And for me, my journey in making it was really complex now that I've also pieced together my entire story. And thank God for the Me Too movement, because I had been in crisis many times. I was working in the camera department for films in New York City when I was 19, started off as a camera intern, moved on to being a camera assistant, a production assistant at times, wardrobe assistant. And I did experience violence by men and sexual assault from a producer that I regarded as my boss and my mentor, who I worked for years. And I thought I had resolved it all for myself and found healing. And then when the Me Too movement happened, it was like, whoa, oh, that's what happened to me.
Right.
And realizing that the first sexual assault that I experienced from that producer boss of mine when I was 19, it really broke something in my spirit.
Yeah.
And sort of made my future, trajectory into my 20s really off kilter. And so with making the movie, while the movie was this really arduous and crushing, weight in my life, because it was just so hard.
Sure.
With and every feature at every level, there's, 10 more work. I just found like comfort in the journey of Dante's Inferno and Purgatory, in the Divine Comedy, because it's all about accountability and soul searching and finding how to correct those broken pieces of yourself, and transmute it into spiritual wholeness again. So I found, and when I first conceived of this idea and wrote the first draft of the script, I was in a medieval poetry class, and we were reading Dante's Inferno, and I was just so moved because it was like these voices, from hundreds of years ago are completely present and accurate, for what we are still experiencing.
Yep, absolutely.
So I had I'm very grateful for that creative journey too, of like feeling, the muses of Dante and these stories to help me get through finishing the film and reconciling my own way.
Yeah, well, it's a beautiful journey, and it was one obviously worth taking. You said something, I think you said self-lie, or it was something around like that, self-lie. And it's interesting, your experience with the Me Too movement. It's interesting that, how did you put it? It was basically when you take that false step or that white lie or whatever it might be, it's very easy to keep continuing in slippery slope, and you become more and more distant from yourself and the truth. And even, that Me Too movement, it's so easy when you're, victimized in a certain way to not even acknowledge the fullness of that to yourself. And then only when you have it kind of, before you is a mirror, and you can say, oh, Jesus, so yeah, I get that is is a huge process and experience, and yet I think getting back to the meaning, and I know you're just about to say something, so can you hold that thought for a second? I think the meaning is in that. That's what I was trying to get to, is that lying to yourself is you know, a quick way to not be happy.
And that self-deception and lying to oneself is also a survival mechanism.
Mm.
And that's what I found in having to just learn about trauma recovery, was the way that these, you know, sexual predators, or in my case, men in power who abuse their authority over me, there's a mindset in that power play. And you know, that's genderless. Power is genderless. It's also, you know, there's no race in the abuse of power. So I like, you know, it's not white men, it's not black or white. It's like the power and the abuse of power is universal.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, in the case of the movie with Sophie, there's definitely some backstory that is hinted at, you know, with a broken relationship with her parents. But the, you know, she means well, but when she starts sort of doing that self-deception, it really I hope it shows, you know, that it's also like her survival strategy, and that's based in fear, which is certainly not going to get her to truth, you know, and that's what spirals her down deeper. And then that's also, you know, it's so fun to have a deep conversation. I'm like, oh,
yeah, yeah.
I'm like, oh, let me.
Yeah, that's why we're doing it. Yeah.
I live for these kinds of conversations.
Yeah, me too.
Oh yeah, her lack of boundaries. So this is another thing that I've learned. Like, you asked me, you know, what have I learned and the meaning of it. Also this past year with the Me Too movement happening, you know, and this like just flood of articles about everything about dynamics and sexual assault at campus, I use the term survivor awareness of, you know, a survivor then looking back and having the revelation and piecing it together, because at times you don't have the language until the language exists, and then you can say what it is, you know? And so for me, golden key was learning about boundaries and healthy boundaries. And Sophie in the movie Surviving Me, she doesn't know how to make boundaries. She doesn't know how to speak the language of consent with her hookup boyfriend, Jimmy. You know, so she has some less than satisfactory experiences with him, but instead of being able to communicate what she actually needs, you know, she just sort of lets it slide, and then she starts dating somebody else, because again, you know, in the hookup culture, you can do that if you're not committed. And so it just, as you know, the audience can see then these boundaries being crossed with everyone, sort of everyone's ends up crossing each other's boundaries. And, you know, there's a relationship that she has with her professor while his wife is befriending her as well. And it's very confusing for Sophie. And there's, you know, a big reveal at the end, so I don't want to spoil it, but it leaves the audience with the question, you know, where was she to blame, and was she really to blame for everything? So I hope everyone can watch the movie. It's available on section2.com. That's sectionii.com, like Roman numeral 2. And
we'll post a link.
Thanks.
So is there anything more that you wanted to say about mindset?
Sure, yeah. I think in storytelling and in reconciling like my experience in the world and finding my voice, I really found that, you know, I mean, in dramatic writing, we get to explore the mindsets of our characters. And for me, through my creative pursuit of that, I've been able to reconcile my relationship with the world and understanding also like mindsets of people, you know, these forces. Like, I can't just generalize anything anymore, because you look at the mindsets of the people or the circumstances that create these situations. And again, like I said, it's neither black or white. Like, you can starts to get gray. And I think that's actually a good thing, because then you can sort of bridge that gap with understanding and firm boundaries. I don't know, maybe I'm rambling.
No, you're not. I mean, it all kind of boils down to awareness and compassion for me, having more understanding for yourself and others. And, the language that you were talking about, it's interesting. Definitely I can relate to not having words. And then when you have the words, it's like, oh, I can understand the behavior and understand, my own mindset. And at the same time, it's driving to get to those words. And I think the driving to get to those words is something that many people lack. It's like, I've got to force myself to be honest with myself. And that's tough, especially when it's things, that you don't want to look at, whether other people you're doing them yourself, and that's that level of raw honesty, that makes healthy individuals. And anytime you bullshit yourself, even with a white lie, that makes unhealthy individuals, and it continues this. And at some point, you hit rock bottom and you got like, I got to scrape myself off the pavement. And where did I go wrong? Oh, it was that lie and that lie and this lie and this lie, so I think for me, and having this dialogue, it's like constantly driving to that truth, driving to the language.
Yeah, totally.
Totally. That empowers us as men, women, people, humans.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Even I found, after our film festival circuit, I did a college tour. I'm still doing a college tour for the film, because I feel like our target audience is college students, and art film lovers. And it's been such a fulfilling experience showing the film to college audiences and having these conversations. And this past year, an article was published in the New Yorker about a new program that Columbia University has with two researchers from the School of Public Health, and it's called SHIFT, which is Sexual Health Initiative to Foster Transformation. And this article was really profound for me to read from my own experience being an undergrad at Columbia. And they say, like, there are certain students who are more vulnerable to sexual assault than others. And it's like, if you're the first in your family to go to college, if you're having a financial aid crisis, if you're having any relationship problems within your family, if you're, questioning your sexuality. And then also they say, just by being in college, you're vulnerable and susceptible to sexual assault, because college is what's called a total institution. So you work, sleep, study, party, and eat all in the same place.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I want to take this message to colleges. Like, why don't you have single sex dorms anymore? Like, keep the boys in one dorm and keep the girls in another, just to have a little bit of calmness, when you're at home, instead of like this constant party. I mean, at least in my college experience, and I do talks often at USC here, and I have a friend who was an undergrad there that she went to a party with a girlfriend, and somebody slipped drugs into their drinks, and she fell and shattered her whole jaw, got stitches, had to drop out of school. It took her like 2 years to recover. Her whole life got derailed, and whoever put that drug in her drink really did it, I suppose, as, just a joke, or just to be, an MFer like that. It wasn't like a sexual assault, but she was assaulted, and it was completely anonymous.
I mean, you got to be pretty whacked to be doing that, and I think that's where, the conversation and the shift and this drive to the conversation for individuals. And, now, we're both at a point where, I don't know, we're 10 more years, 20 years, I don't know how many it is for me, out of college. And it's like going on 20, maybe it's been. And it's like, we are the adults that are driving conversations forward. That's part of the reason for a show like this. It's part of the reason that you made the movie that you did. And, to say, hey guys, this, getting high all the time isn't going to get you to a place where you want to be. You know, you have to be responsible with things like that, and sex, and your body, and, you know, just in life. So, you know, it's just creating a different conversation. And thank you for doing that. Last question is, you know, whether, you know, because I think we've spoken a lot about what you've learned since doing this film. If there's something topical on the top of your mind, you know, do please share it. If there's also, you know, you've made a feature that's quite a feat. If there are some words of wisdom that you'd like to share around, I think the collaborative process, as well as technical potentially, of making a film and what you've learned in that regard, that would be great as well.
Sure. I highly recommend, you know, finding your tribe and working. In my case, you know, my life started to get better when I began working with other women. And especially now that's more available with the internet and more women filmmakers groups happening. But another filmmaking mentor of mine, a director, he said, men aren't going to help you. Men are just looking to, you know, especially in Hollywood, like, you know, there's still that abuse of power where they are sexualizing any woman who, and Dowd in the New York Times said, like, Hollywood is as bad as Saudi Arabia with how they abuse women. And unfortunately, I agree with her from my own experience. So, you know, when my mentor said that to me, like, your men aren't going to help you. You have to look to the women. And that is what helped me. So if you're a female filmmaker, you know, work with enlightened men like yourself, you know, and, or find your sisterhood. And, you know, because men and women are different. We are telling different stories. And I'm especially excited to hear how men's stories will change now from what I feel was that, you know, porn infused sort of entertainment mindset of Girls Gone Wild, and you know, even video games like what's that one where they steal cars and run over prostitutes? GTA.
I would, yeah, something we won't even mention it, but yeah, there's, I'm sure, a million of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, if I'm excited to see stories from men where integrity starts to return. And, you know, anyhow, with women, advice to young filmmakers. That's my advice. Yeah. For men to find their voices from their hearts, and women to find their voices from their hearts, and to start, you know, telling stories that aren't just sexy or pop, you know, but are also deep and even uncomfortable, because art should be dangerous. You know, art should be pushing taboos and boundaries and confronting the status quo in a way that I believe should make your audience uncomfortable and question, you know.
I love that. I think, you know, filmmakers should be uncomfortable making movies, you know. Yeah, that's awesome. Leah Yananton, thank you so much. Surviving Me, writer, director. I really look forward to checking out the film. Maybe we'll talk again after I have done so. Congratulations on your work, and congratulations on the journey that you've gone through and where you're at, and for all your courage. And thanks for being on the show, and thanks for a great conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Leah. All right, till next time. Later, guys.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in this week. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe and leave us a like and or a comment. It makes a big difference. Play It Forward is brought to you by Digipops, where we're building a community to put film and filmmaker discovery in your hands. Here, filmmakers and fans, the creative class, recognizes each other fairly and transparently through a community-curated film festival each quarter. It's coming soon. Thank you.